of having arrived and perpetually becoming. And in the course of those inquiries, the question's also been asked, what is the Dharma? And now the question is asked of us, what is it that happens when we've reconciled these two, arriving and becoming? So let's see if these several stories will help us to answer both of those questions. The first is that story about the great founder of the Sufi order called the Naqshbandis. But the Naqshbandis are also called the weavers. Now, the founder of the Naqshbandi order had the trade of being a tinsmith, and his wife was well known for her wonderful weaving. So it so happened that the founder of this order was incarcerated. He was jailed. But his wife, clever as she was, went off to the locksmith who had made the locks for the jail, and from him obtained a pattern, a design of the lock. And she wove this into a prayer mat, which was given, of course, to her husband. Now, in the meantime, her husband had befriended his jailers and obtained from them the tools and the materials that allowed him to make small objects that the jailers could sell to augment their meager salaries. But when the prayer mat was given to him, and as he bowed his head in prayer on the mat, he realized that it contained the design of the lock, and he was able to fashion with his tools and his material the key that fitted the lock. So one day when his jailers came, he was not to be found inside. The Naqshbandi order of Sufis is still called the weavers. And the second story is about an old, illiterate man who lived in the mountains of Tibet, and he had the trade of being a carpenter. He was diligent and dedicated to his work. He was a widower who had an only daughter who cared for him, devoted to him, served him. But there was a time when his daughter, out buying their needs to sustain them, met a group of lamas from the capital, Lhasa, who were visiting the village in which the carpenter and his daughter lived. So the daughter was influenced by the teachings of these great lamas, who taught that if one became dedicated to the Buddha, one would not have to be reborn and would find themselves in the heavenly fields called doowa-chen. So the daughter became a dedicated follower of these teachings, longing as she did for liberation from the wheel of births and deaths. Now she tried to convince her father, and even though it was evident that she became calm, peaceful, this was not noticed by her father, who was completely absorbed in his work. But the years went by, and he reached the stage where he was no longer able to go out to ply his trade. His daughter, realizing that she indeed was achieving her goal to complete those practices which would ensure that she would arrive at that celestial place, doowa-chen, she longed to have her father also be liberated. And so she meditated on this, and she had an inspiration. She went to her father and she said, "Father, there is a great Lama called Amitabha," which of course is a name for the Buddha, "who needs a palace designed and built, and has asked that you undertake the task. Would you do so?" And her father, not without some pride in his voice, said, "You know that whatever task I undertake, I fulfill. I will take on this work." And so he set about the task of designing the palace for the Buddha. Now the daughter had realized from the teachings of the Lamas that anyone who dedicated themselves to the Buddha were assured of arriving at doowa-chen. And so the father, absolutely absorbed and dedicated in his task, reminded from time to time by his daughter of what was needed in the palace. When it came time for him to depart these earthly realms, he had already arrived at that state called liberation, and arose as expected to that celestial realm. His daughter followed him in due course of time. How do these two stories give us the possibility of answering both questions? What is the Dharma? And what is it that's present when, having arrived and perpetually becoming, have been reconciled in our being? What do these two stories tell us? Is it possible that we can look back on our life and recognize that every experience everything that has been undertaken, every discipline that we've done, are the tools that are used after having arrived and becoming, have been reconciled, and we find ourselves living the Dharma. What is the answer? What is this Dharma? What is it that's happening for us as in these two being reconciled? Every tool is used, as the Zen say, using efficacious means for one purpose and one purpose only, the fulfillment of the one Dharma. Where are we now? What is this Dharma that every breath we take, every gesture we make, every deed we do is the Dharma?